It's actually not 90 degrees. It is nice and crispy outside because this is a fall recommendation video. I have over 20 books that I want to go ahead and share. I put all these books into categories. So we have literary horror, Feral Girl fall. I was inspired after I saw this video. So many good Feral Girl fall recommendations, by the way. Definitely recommend you check it out. Short story collection, classic haunted house stories, fantasies, thrillers. I had way too many gothic and vampire books to include in this video, so I'm going to dedicate a separate video to all of those. And a disclaimer that these books are not the fall, warm, cozy, feel-good kind of books. Well, I guess it depends on the way you look at it, but a lot of these are dark, twisted, feral. They are out there in some of the best ways. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about some of these, so I'm really excited to share. Let's get into it. Starting with one of my personal favorite subgenres, I think it would be called, is literary horror. I have 4 different books for this category. The first 2 touch on similar themes of beauty and overall wellness taken to an extreme. The first one is called Natural Beauty. In this book, we have a narrator who was a piano prodigy, absolutely beautiful at playing the piano. Everything is going well until her parents get in a really bad car accident. This leaves her having to abandon playing the piano to help cover the financial cost of all of these medical bills. So she lands a job at this very well-known wellness center. This center is one that will do just about anything to maintain the overall physical appearance of its customers. Not only was there commentary on the beauty and wellness industry as a whole, it also talked a lot about classism, racism, sexism. Commentary was very striking. I remember that ending being so jarring when I finished it, and overall the book as a whole left me reflecting a whole lot. There is some body horror in this, so just do be mindful. The other book that also talks a lot about beauty and wellness is Rouge. This is one of my favorite books of last year. I am heavily biased when I talk about this, and I know that. I love that this felt like an escapism to me. I was going into a fairy tale every time that I opened this book. In this book, we follow our main character named Belle. Belle just loses her mom, and so she flies back to Southern California where her mom was living, tie up some loose ends, get her physical belongings, and go on with her life. At least that was the plan. That is until these red pumps appear. She starts to travel down this path of red roses, and she is just led into an unforgettable night that feels all-consuming. There's so much beautiful and lush imagery with the jellyfish and the roses and the color red and drinking a wine cup full of stars. So while it does have that commentary on the beauty industry, it truly feels like a Mona Awada book you can just get lost in, and it also has that mother-daughter dynamic that we get to study throughout the book, which was a nice little touch. Next up, we have Monstrillo by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This is a debut novel, and it is beautiful. It is really heavy though. So this story focuses on 2 parents, Magos and Joseph. They are grieving the loss of their son, Santiago. Everyone handles grief differently, but this mom decides to cut open her son's chest, slice out a little bit of his lung, put it in a mason jar, give that mason jar some caldito, and it slowly starts to form into a little monster. And then from there, this book gets really crazy. The story is split into 4 different POVs. We have Joseph, Magos, their best friend, and then Santiago. The multiple POVs did add a lot to the story, and I think all in all, it was just really interesting for me to read a book that had a physical representation for this grief, because when you are grieving the loss of someone, it just feels so heavy and all-consuming. So to have something to physically represent it in something tangible, it added to how everyone dealt with the grief. I read this for book club and a lot of people seemed to enjoy it, obviously myself included. Next up, we have Chlorine, which is a very dark coming of age story. As I mentioned, I love going into a book knowing little to no information about it, but I cannot stress enough to check content warnings for this book. It has a lot of very serious topics, a lot of things that people cannot stomach, and it's not going to be for everyone. If you love weird, bordering feral kind of books, Chlorine is going to be for you. We follow a character named Ren. Ren grew up reading stories about mermaids, loved being in water, and it just made her feel at home. Naturally, she joins the competitive high school swim team. When you're in high school and you just want to be independent, make your own decisions, it is so hard for Ren because she does not have a sense of agency. There's this pressure from her parents, from her coach, being on the competitive swim team, and it all just builds up into the point that she feels there's only one way to reach the sense of agency that she is so desperately craving, and she'll go to great lengths in order to reach that. It was crazy. I was not expecting the ending. I did listen to this as an audiobook, and I recommend you do the same. That book can segue us into the Feral Girl fall theme that I got after I watched this this video, it left me thinking, what kind of books would I deem as Feral Girl Fall? Now, I do have a couple that she also mentioned as well, just because this author is a staple, these two in particular, but I would say Mona Awad as a whole. These three are my favorite. I Love You Bunny oh so much. I did a reread of this year and I absolutely loved it even more the second time around. There's so many references in here, and this was the first book that I read by Mona Awad that I was like, I need more. Then I went on to All's Well, which I received as an ARC at the time. I was so excited that I got to read this. This focuses on a Shakespeare play that is being done at a high school. The main character does deal with chronic pain, and this one was really fun as well. And then, as I just mentioned, for literary horror, Rouge, my personal favorite. And if I had to rank them, I would say Rouge, then Bunny, and then All's Well. The other author that we had in common is Eileen. Eileen was one of those books that I read for a 24-hour reading challenge. I wasn't sure about it in the beginning because halfway through it is pretty slow paced, but the last half felt like whiplash, and when I finished the book, I was just staring at a wall, really confused on what I had just read. In this book, we follow our character named Eileen. Eileen is a self-loathing 24-year-old. She lives with her dad. Her dad is an alcoholic. She is a secretary at a boys' prison. She's not working as a secretary. She's just trying to keep her dad from drinking and driving. The house is really empty and alone, and the first half felt very melancholy. That is until Eileen meets a new co-worker named Rebecca. Love the name, by the way. That is when everything picks up, and this book really takes a turn in a direction that I was not expecting. I really love a good character study like this, and I think it is totally worth pushing through that first half. And then I want to go ahead and add I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. I originally listened to this as an audiobook. I picked up a physical copy because I loved the commentary and I wanted to go back in and underline some of my favorite parts, but the audiobook was great. So in this book, we follow an unnamed protagonist. She is hate following the other woman of the man that she is having an affair with, aka she's following his wife. Chapters in here are super short. Sometimes it's just a page. At tops, it could be 3-4 pages. It felt like I was reading her journal with her most crazy, intrusive thoughts. So although she is going all crazy FBI intense cyber stalking mode, she also balances that out by giving really good commentary. And the commentary is about the influence of race and class within these political and social constructs that she sees online. So she is extremely self-aware of what's going on, how unhealthy this is, how this is not adding any value to her, but it is this obsession that she cannot stop, and she continues to stalk online. It was a really quick read, a really interesting and engaging read, and I really liked it overall. Since I keep mentioning audiobooks, we can go ahead and go over the thrillers that I have. So 3 out of the 4 thrillers I would recommend as an audiobook, starting with The Quiet Tenant. This book was crazy and also had multiple POVs. If you've read a book, Notes on an Execution, I think you will really like this one as well. Follow this man who basically is living a doubled life. So to the community and those around him, he is a mourning single father, really going through it, trying to raise his only daughter. But what the community doesn't know is he's actually a serial killer / kidnapper, and he has been for the past 5 years with this girl that he found and has been keeping her hidden. Through those 5 years, she's really worked on strengthening that rapport, building his trust, and so when it comes time to move, instead of killing her, he decides, you know what, I'm gonna let her stay in the house where my daughter also lives. She is going to be the family friend. What could go wrong with that, right? And as I mentioned with the multiple POVs, we follow the woman who is the kidnappee, his daughter, and the local woman at the bar that he is seeing. This was a really quick read for me. I personally did not see that ending coming. Next up, we have a book called The Center. The Center is a thriller, but it's also kind of speculative fiction. The main character in this works as a translator. Specifically, she translates these Bollywood films, which is okay, but she wants something different. She wants something more. When she finds this man in one of her lectures and he starts to speak, I think, 3 different languages, she goes by and asks him, how are you able to learn all of this? And after a while, he does end up telling her how he is able to speak all of these languages so fluently. And it ends up being this elite word-of-mouth facility where basically you can learn any language that you want in 7 days. And you can reach fluency in any of these languages. Obviously, she packs her bags, she goes, she learns a language, she wants more, and continues to want more. And the more time that she spends at this facility, the more information starts to unravel. It is a really sick and dark twist that I personally was not expecting, and an audiobook that I really loved. Next up, we have Foe by Ian Reid. I love Ian Reid for the fall. I read this for my sibling book club, and I was surprised at how much I liked it, actually. In this book, the year is 2065. We follow two characters, one named Junior, the other one named Henrietta. They live this very mundane life. They live pretty much in the middle of nowhere. They don't have any neighbors that are close to them. Everything just seems fine and dandy until there's a car that approaches their house and tells them that they have been selected, Junior specifically, to be a part of this big mission. And this big mission is that he gets to go up to space, but he shouldn't worry because there's going to be a replacement for him, for Henrietta, while he's gone. This is told through the POV of Junior. Junior is a character that really grew on me as the story went on, and he really has to grapple with the fact that he has to leave and he really doesn't have any choice in the matter. This is again another really interesting character analysis on what it means to be human, the study on relationships. I can't vouch for how good it would be as an audiobook because I did read the physical copy of this one. I know an audiobook is available, but it is a really fast-paced read. I think if I wasn't reading this for a book club, I would have been able to finish it in 1 to 2 sittings because once you start, you are really hooked on what's going to happen next. The latest book that I've read in this list is actually Tender is the Flesh. This is a dystopian thriller and it's a lot to stomach. But in this one, this is a dystopian world. There is this infectious disease that broke out amongst the animals. So humans are no longer able to eat any animals. It means cannibalism is now legal and humans are now being either bred or fed. So it brings into question a lot about our morals, our ethics. The main character in this, his name is Marcos, and he runs a meat processing plant. There is a chapter where we get a tour of his job. It is so detailed and so disturbing, and I was cutting chicken thighs. I do not recommend that you listen to the audiobook as you eat or as you cook, actually. You have been warned. But outside of that, I think the book was really, really interesting. There are certain things that people highlight from this book. So yes, there's commentary on cannibalism, capitalism, how capitalism is eating itself. My preference in this was the eerie amount of detail, and this can be within certain scenes, like the one that I mentioned, where the author's very selective decision-making with the characters, their action, the way that they communicate. Not for the faint of heart, but boy was it good. I'm starting to sweat in this cardigan. I need to hurry up. We're gonna move on to short story collection. These 3 are some of my favorites. We are going to start with The Dangers of Smoking in Bed. This book was crazy. I think this is one of the first books I read last year that really lingered with me. With short story collections as a whole, I think it's really hard to find one where you like either all of the stories or at least 90% of the stories. This one had a lot of my personal favorites. There were themes that I was not expecting, moments that I truly had to stop reading because it really just grossed me out, or it was just extremely sinister. Some of my favorites I'll share: Our Lady of the Quarry, The Cart, Where Are You Dear Heart, Meet, Kids Who Come Back, The Dangers of Smoking in Bed. I started to give you literally all the short stories, but they really are that good. I really, really enjoyed this one. Along similar lines is The House Guest and Other Stories by Amparo Davila. These stories are a bit different. Fragment of a Diary is one that I find myself thinking a lot of. I also really liked The House Guest. I loved Oscar, Breakfast, The Last Summer, The Funeral. Basically, I liked all of them. They're all really, really good. I think Fragment of a Diary out of this one is my personal favorite, and Where Are You Dear Heart is my personal favorite out of here. Lastly, we have The Diving Pool by Yoko Ogawa. Yoko Ogawa, a staple author for me. This book I would recommend for fans of The Shining. It feels like a typical average life, but you have this level of eeriness. Everything just feels a little unsettling. You can't really put your finger on what it is. But as you read the story, the same way as you watch the film, that feeling gets bigger, and it just continues to increase until you have this moment and everything comes undone. That is how Yoko Ogawa's writing feels for me. This collection is 3 different novellas. We follow a foster girl, foster boy, a swimming pool, and the other one we follow these 2 sisters. One of them is pregnant, or is she? Which sister is the one hallucinating, or are neither of them? And then the last one focuses on a boarding house, a really odd, peculiar man, a lot of silence, and a really weird ending. Moving on to fantasy, I do surprisingly have a couple of different fantasies. The first one, Olivia Blake, I think as an author in general. The one that I have here is One for My Enemy. I also used to own a copy of Masters of Death, but I did gift that. This was my first book by this author. I was not expecting to love this as much as I did until I had a book friend tell me that this is a combination of Succession, but they're witches. We do follow these two rival witch families. There are a bunch of characters that we're introduced to, which sometimes can overwhelm me personally, but it was really easy to follow. There's some romance as a subplot, and I just love the way that they were speaking to one another. I was underlining so much when I was reading their scenes, and I think when I read this I gave it a 5 out of 5. Then in Masters of Death we follow again another wide range of characters. This book follows a real estate vampire who needs the help of Death's godson to pretend to be a medium, and they team up together to get rid of this ghost in one of the homes that the real estate vampire is trying to sell. Overall, it was just fun. Another quick book is Comfort Me with Apples. This book is set in a suburban town, and it is kind of like Don't Worry Darling mixed with a really well-known story, and it's a retelling of this story. If I tell you the story, it's going to give it away, and I want that shock value to still be there. That is the overall feel of the book, and this just felt like I stumbled into this rabbit hole with this perfect world on the exterior, but slowly we start to chip away at it until we get into what's really going on. Two more for fantasy. Next up we have The Haunting of Alejandra. This is more of a contemporary horror novel focusing on La Llorona. La Llorona is a part of Mexican folklore, and it is about this spirit of a mother roams around wailing like a siren because she had this big fit of rage, and in that rage she drowned her children. This rage happened because she found out that her husband was cheating on her. There are subtle variations to this story. That is what I was told when I was growing up. This book uses La Llorona as an element to talk about a character, Alejandra, who on the outside seems like she has a perfect life. She's married, has her home, has 3 beautiful, healthy children, feels like she has everything put together. That exterior of perfection is just a shell. She feels like she is a shell of a person. She has a lot of depression, and she's really struggling with how to vocalize that. So this book focuses on breaking that generational trauma that she has as a Mexican-American woman. I checked this out from the library, and again, I did a tandem read with the audiobook. Lastly, we have one of my favorites, and it is Coraline. I did in fact watch the film before I read the book. I have rewatched that film so many times. It is one of my favorites. Reading that book truly was such an experience. A majority of the time I will do a tandem read. I recommend the audiobook actually for this one because there is a song that the little mice play. When I was listening to this audiobook, I was on a walk and I had to pause because I heard the song and I thought my phone had accidentally switched apps and I was on Spotify for some reason. But no, the song was added to the audiobook, and it is so weird and so eerie, but I highly recommend. And being such a fan of the film, I was able to compare elements and characters in the film that are not in the book. And if you think the film is really dark, the book is even darker. There are certain scenes that are adjusted that I was just truly shocked by when I was reading. If you love the film, read the book. If you haven't watched the film, still read the book. And the last category is the haunting house element, specifically the top 3. When I talk about the top 3, I am talking about Rebecca, The Hacienda, and Mexican Gothic. A lot of them have very similar themes, so much so that when I read the book The Hacienda, I listened to an author interview. She said that she pulled inspiration from Rebecca and from Mexican Gothic. In these 3 stories, there is always this focus on the haunting house. It plays such an important role within these novels. The first book that I personally read, which one was it actually? I was about to say very confidently Rebecca, but I think I actually read The Hacienda first. So in The Hacienda, this woman marries this man. She then has to move to his big estate. She does have to travel to go to war, so she stays in this really big home, and at night she hears really weird things. They tell her not to travel to certain parts of the home. Very similarly to Rebecca, she does have to get a priest involved. I listened to the audiobook, loved it, devoured it, listened all in one day. And then when I heard that interview and she talked about Rebecca, I read Rebecca. I think about this book probably once a day. Rebecca was Mr. De Winter's first wife. Something happens, she's no longer living. Mrs. De Winter now comes in, freshly newlywed, goes into the house. The staff all love and prefer Rebecca. Weird things start to happen in the house. Big secrets are revealed. You think you know a character and then you find out who really did not. A really good introduction if you want to get into reading classics. Along similar lines is Mexican Gothic. In this one though, it's the cousin that marries someone, and so they move away. The cousin starts to write letters to her other cousin, telling her she doesn't feel good, things feel off, so the cousin goes to visit, stays temporarily in this house. The illness, the people, the house all start to unravel. I loved this one as well, and again, I recommend it as an audiobook. So those are all of the books that I would recommend for fall. I hope you were able to find something in here that you enjoy. If you have any recommendations for books similar to the ones that I mentioned, please comment and let me know. And thanks for watching.